All right. Hello and welcome everybody to the weekly SIG Docs meeting. Good to see everyone. I'm Jim Angel, a co-host or co-chair of SIG Docs, and today is February 23rd, 2021. And so it looks like everyone here is returning members. So good to see everyone again. Thanks for joining. And as far as updates and reminders go, this week's PR Wrangler is Caitlin Bernard. I chatted with her just a couple days ago, and I know that she's working on wrangling those PRs. And next week is Karen Bradshaw or KB Hockey. And provers, make sure you know your scheduled PR Wrangler shifts. There is a link in the docs. So moving on to the agenda, release 121. Ray, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, so I'm seeing their status is yellow. We haven't really pinged the enhancement owners. We're still waiting until after code freeze to do that. So March 10th. So we still have a few weeks. So we are seeing a few more doc PRs being created very, very slowly. So other than that, the branch sync for last week went smoothly and was merged, and the integration branch is healthy. So yeah, so we should get a few more doc PRs in the next few weeks, and then we'll get a big surge right before the doc PR deadline. So
Awesome. So is the yellow more of a tentative yellow, knowing more by March?
it is more tentative yellow, and since this cycle is a little different in how we're still trying to change how we communicate. Like last cycle, we would be pinging the enhancement owners, but so were the other teams as well. So we wanted to reduce the amount of reaches or touches to the enhancement owners, and leave it to a certain team, and then the certain team takes over. So on March 10th, and then our docs team will take over with reaching out to the enhancements owners.
Awesome. Sounds good. I'm glad to hear also that the merging and the integration branch is healthy. It's been great seeing different folks sharing that workload. I feel like that was a little bit of a taboo task, and I think the more people that know it, the better. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. So moving on, looks like Ray, it's your show. So I'll give it back to you.
So I have a few PRs I want to talk about. One is 26629. So there's a new page that was merged onto the Kubernetes website. It's the API deprecation guide. So it's out live on master, and there is the PR 26629 is adding the POTS security policy deprecation to that API deprecation guide on the master branch. So just want to bring this up into discussion. I know I pinged the SIG Docs lead, and someone else pinged the SIG release leads on this. So there's going to be a lot of communication on this. Some feel that it should be live on the master branch, even though the release is not here yet, because the KK, the code related PR has already merged onto the master branch. I saw Chiming adding his comments of that it should be submitted to the dev 1.21 branch. And I think one of these SIG docs lead, I forgot who mentioned that he was okay with it going to the master branch since it is planned out, but we should. So there's a lot of communication about this, and I think there's, I can see on both sides, but I don't know where to go from here. So I don't know who also makes that final decision of like where it should go to, if it should go to dev 1.21 or should go to the master branch. So.
And I see that there's one. Oh no, that was merged. So there was when the PSP is marked deprecated in the dev 121 branch, correct?
Yes. So there's two PRs actually for about PSP. One is on the this PR that's open is solely just for the API deprecation guide, and is on the targeting the master branch.
Gotcha. Yeah, and this is one of those things that's really going to be a judgment call. Ultimately, like you were saying, there's arguments to be had on both sides there. I guess at this time, and I'll definitely need to take I need to take a closer look at the PSP current state. Is there anybody being impacted by this? That I'm trying to see like what the value is of this merging into master versus going into 121 and going out the door when that releases. Is there something that I'm not understanding or not seeing about the criticality of this merging into master versus dev?
I don't think so. Also, one of the reasons why there's some context behind here as well is that that the API deprecation guide was not, I did not sync it before this merge this PR was made. So there was no API deprecation guide in the 1.21 branch. I did it like 2 hours afterwards. That, you know, that being said, that might have changed if that was done, if, you know, this PR was made after I did the branch sync. I don't know. I do agree that I believe that we should, you know, we talked about deprecations and how we should plan out how we communicate those deprecations. I believe this is kind of sidestepping those plans, since it's going to be live on the master branch.
So
Yeah.
maybe, you know, maybe I can give some background about this PR. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. By convention, we, in our style guide, we said that we make no predictions about future API versions. So that was a rule for the whole team. But this PR, the deprecation API page is breaking that. But after reviewing the content, we believe, okay, let's make it an exception, because that is the only page we are making some predictions into the future. So if we are accepting that page is an exception for the whole site, merging it into master is not a big problem. It's okay, but it's not the best option from my side. So I suggested let's put it into 1.21.
Yeah, that does make sense. And I recall seeing that in the style guide about, you know, you can't talk about future state or current state because that's, you know, forever changing essentially. The one challenging thing here, and Jimmy, you definitely identified this is somewhat of a forward-looking document. You know, we're talking about future deprecations beyond the current scope. Yeah, I'm just trying. What I'm trying to think about here is, I think no matter what, whether this goes into master or whether this goes into Dev 121, it really is impacting folks for 1.25. And I know that this is part of the initiative to give folks a kind of a further outlook on the roadmap, maybe further documentation. And so I get the reasoning for wanting to put this in master. I really don't think it's going to make that big of a deal whether it goes into master or in a few months or a few weeks it goes into the release branch. As far as impact to end users, I think this is really gonna I think this will come down to more of a judgment call. um I think this page inherently already violates the style guide without this PR included. And so it might be worth, you know, potentially cleaning up the style guide in the sense of putting a asterisk or an exclusion for the specific forward looking page, or maybe clarify the language around that. But that's not really the topic at hand here. It's really about whether this goes into master or not. And I'm of the opinion that this isn't something that is coming in 1.21, this deprecation, for example. Uh, it almost seems like if we're going to allow this as a team as SIG Docs, it should go into master or whatever branch is currently active, only based on the fact of that it's already forward looking beyond the release. Now, if we SIG Docs were to say we don't want forward looking documents and we really don't want this approach, or maybe there's a better home for it, I think the argument then would be made, where's that home to be relocated at? But I'm interested, what do other folks think?
I don't have a strong opinion. Both acceptable.
I just want to be cautious because I know we're making a big effort, especially with the how we handle deprecations. I agree that I don't think it matters really, but I know there's other people that are working on communication efforts, and I don't want to, you know, I don't want to overstep them. So that's the only, and that's my personal opinion.
Now you're talking about other folks more on the release side, SIG release working.
Yeah, and more. Yeah, exactly. On the SIG release side, and I know there's a blog planned out that's still in draft as well, and there's discussions on the timing of that blog as well as the first communication about the PSP deprecation. So ideally, I know that was talked about, how that was discussed, if that would be the first communication points, and so this would be kind of sidestepping that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm wondering, has this been brought up to SIG release? I would imagine I see some of these folks on here most likely are being driven by SIG release as well. Have they been aware of this, or is there any a conversation around it?
We haven't. Our weekly meetings tomorrow, so I was going to bring it up and see what people think about this.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's going to be the. I'm just going to add a note here. Sorry, too many windows open here. Yeah, so I think ultimately, whether this goes in master or dev, the 121, I don't think it's really going to be the conversation to be had here. It makes sense in both because neither one of them are impacted by this decision, impacted by this doc, whether it lands a little bit early. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a massive. I don't think there's a huge compromise being made in either one of those branches being merged. But I do think you're absolutely right, Ray, that if you don't mind bringing this up with SIG release tomorrow at the meeting, let's just get consensus. It doesn't need to be a big ordeal, but really just alignment. Potentially even pinging the sub project for the blog, potentially just making sure that generally just communication alignment here is really what I see as being the gap.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. So you good owning that one, Ray?
Yeah, I'll take that.
And I will say on record, if it happens to merge into master, if it happens to get retargeted to a dev 121 branch while these conversations are happening, I think that's not going to be too terrible either. But I think it's the right thing to do is making sure everyone's on the same page. Cool. I think the next one's you as well here.
Yeah, so this is not really for a review because the CLA has not been signed, but I just want to know what happens when a PR targets a dev 1.21 branch and the CLA has not been signed yet. And so, then we hit release date. What do I close it out or?
Yeah, so I was looking at this PR a little before the meeting, and it looks like it might not be necessarily correct to begin with, based on how many commits are being brought over within it. In addition to that, this was opened up January 15th. There's been communication, pretty much subsequent approvers, reviewers, and it's almost been no activity from the original PR requester. So what I've done, and this is most likely what the PR Wrangler should be doing, but maybe not seeing it because it's on the Dev 121 release branch. I usually take a judgment call here. And I look at something like this and I say, okay, this has been open since January 15th. The person who opened it up, their current status, I believe when I checked, it was they may be slow to respond. And I think a month is a reasonable amount of time for a response. So the long story short here, I think that it would be completely fair to close this out, and not in a negative connotation, but more of, hey, this has been open with no response. We're going to close this out, whatever that date range may be, and then just let them know if they want to reopen it. Absolutely can within the time frame. It looks like a mistake. However, I think that would be the best steps forward. And me personally, I usually, rule of thumb, look around for about 2 weeks of activity, maybe a month, depending on if there's been some communication or some sort of relay communication between the opener or the author and the reviewers. But the fact that this has been radio silent, I think it's already been overly generous how long it's been open with no feedback.
All right, that sounds good. Thank you for that. Yeah, I'll wait a little bit. We have plenty of time, before the 121 release, but I'll probably ping the the author 1 or 2 more times, but it's been a lot, it's been over a month. So
definitely. And one other thing too that I've used in the past that has been pretty successful is leaving a comment saying, hey, look, this has been open for X amount of time. If I don't have a response by a certain date, I'm going to close this PR and feel free to reopen. That's another way to set a artificial deadline to say, look, we're not going around just closing PRs. We've gave you notice and nobody said anything.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good.
Cool. All right. So moving on, Jiming, you want to talk a little bit about the config API generator?
Yes, I have an issue filed number 23889 long time ago. It's about generating some unpublished APIs. Oh, whatever. Generating some references for the unpublished APIs. For example, people are using Kubernetes config more frequently today than using command line flags, because eventually command line flags are going away or being deprecated. But we always get confused how the config file should look like. We don't have a reference for that. It is not published from the API server or anywhere else. Similarly, for kube proxy, kube scheduler, API server, we don't have a config well documented anywhere. So that's the reason I worked on this. I have already proposed a PR to the reference docs repo. Using that tool, we can generate this API, this quote unquote API references for this purpose. Other than that, I also found that there are some places in the documentation we are referring the readers, the users to go source code. That doesn't always make good sense, because not all users are Golang programmers. When they are reading the Go docs or the source code, they get confused. So we'd better document them as regular APIs. So that's the reason I worked on this. We have a PR to the reference docs repo. That's the tool for the reference generation, and several PRs proposed to the website. I listed them here. I hope these PRs can be reviewed soon. I would like to hear any feedbacks, any suggestions on that. Also related to this is when I was generating the references for these config things, Tim Bannister raised a question. In one of the generated reference, he saw data types like map string, string slice. All those kind of things are also Golang specific. It doesn't make a lot of sense to regular users. So the next item on the agenda is about tuning flag type for component reference. That's another improvement to the component reference generation. So in this new generator, I'm tuning the data type generation. So you will not see string slice. You will see comma separated strings. You will not see map string string. You will see comma separated key equal value pairs. So that makes more sense to user, and hopefully can cause less confusion. So that's my update.
Awesome. Is there anywhere that there's an example of what the output looks like when it's published?
Which one? You mean the config API?
So I see the pull request for the reference docs, and maybe it's one of the website PRs. If there's a PR to look at like the generated output from those files, or maybe it's on your own personal fork.
No, the generated files are already on the preview. And for most of the PRs, I have also pasted the preview link to the PR.
Cool. Let me see if I have one here. Do you mind adding the link for the preview, or just helping me out here? I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the link to take a look at what this looks like when it's actually published.
Okay, later on I will post it on the chat window.
Cool. Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
So my thought is this is actually pretty near and dear to my heart because when I was operationally supporting Kubernetes, I had to go through the Go docs to figure out some of the kubelet configs and some of the kubeadm parameters and things that weren't necessarily clear in the documentation. And I remember bringing up this issue with SIG multi-cluster lifecycle, and the general opinion there was the code is moving too fast to regularly keep docs up to date. So the best source of truth is the Go docs because they're automatically generated and they exist. With saying that, I completely agree to ask folks just to go and grok docs or grok the Go docs is not necessarily the best contributor experience, in my opinion. So I think this is a great effort. I do think that it might be worth syncing up with multi-cluster lifecycle to make sure that they're on the same page. What I fear is if something were to change with the way that they're writing their code, deploying their changes, or what does this look like on a release cycle, are just some of the questions that I'm thinking about right now. But with saying that, I think it's a great effort, and I completely agree that the user experience today is pretty poor.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I see you sent the preview in there. I'm going to add this to the meeting notes as well. And then also, so would the opinion be that this gets ran every release, or I guess what would be the frequency of this being updated?
Yeah, so that's the only left item on my to-do list. I will propose some changes to the release process so that the generation of all these config APIs will be included automatically.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I think here I think the best next steps here would be to get the PRs open on your to-do list for the release process, and then improving that piece as well. So opening the PRs needed for the instructions for the release. And then I also think that these PRs should have some sort of technical review or technical LGTM from either multi-cluster lifecycle. I think that those would be they would be the people who you'd want to talk to. I would imagine you could bring it up on Slack or potentially join one of their meetings. But I guess what I'm looking for here is just making sure there's general overall consensus. There's a lot of great work being done here, and I want to make sure that they're not, expecting something else or planning on doing any changes, and that they're aware of this coming downstream. I just don't want to operate under, a single silo or a bubble.
Yeah. Understood.
Cool. And then, so do you want to take the action item then for outstanding to-do list, and maybe, or that, when I say outstanding to-do list, the outstanding release changes, opening that PR, and then maybe communicating with multi-cluster lifecycle before that?
Yes, I will.
Awesome. Sounds good. I'm going to make a note here. Cool. All right. All right. Any other issues or PRs folks would like to discuss? All right, moving on for the discussion. So just a reminder, we had our quarterly planning scheduled for last week. With the power outage and some of the craziness in my life, we rescheduled for this upcoming Thursday. So just a reminder that we're planning on this Thursday doing the quarterly review. For context for the folks on this call, we're really talking about what happened in Q4 and what we're going to accomplish in Q2, and a little bit of what has happened in Q1. So if there's anything that folks would like to add to the agenda to discuss, the agenda doc is in the link there. And I plan on spending some time and just, getting the current up-to-date stats so we can kick off the Thursday quarterly planning as a success. Any questions on the quarterly planning? All right. All right, Siyoko, I'll pass it over to you for the Korean localization update.
Hello, I'm Korean localization team leader Soko, and I hope to share Korean localization current status. And as you know, Korean localization team using a milestone strategy, and we are working on Korean localization branch. Current branch is 120 KO5. It is actually fifth Korean localization branch, and it is based on the master branch. This branch was opened around 3 days ago, and status is good to go, and it is just to sharing for sharing our current status. Okay, do you have any question or opinion on our progress?
No, it's awesome to hear everything is green. Is there anything SIG Docs can help with?
I have a minor question, and I need your opinion. It is the second bullet, and Korean localization team would like to use milestone pro command. It is to use milestone functionality of GitHub by comment. We are using milestone a milestone to announce current Korean localization schedule. To announce Korean localization schedule, we use two methods. The first one is opening an issue. It's announcing new localization branch and the target merge date. And also we are using milestone. As you can see, we created Dev 120 KO5 milestone. But currently we are using GitHub GUI for creating milestone and assigning PR and issue to a milestone. If we can use the milestone pro command, then we don't need to use the GitHub GUI to assigning milestone. So in order to use that milestone pro command, some of our team members need to be included in the website milestones maintainers team. As you can see the link, we need to be involved. And the question is that in Korean team meeting, we agreed to request to be involved in the milestone branch, milestone maintainer for all Korean content reviewers. So I'm not sure it is appropriate to be involved in that milestone maintainers. Currently, Korean content reviewer in Korean team is around seven members. So I'm not sure it is appropriate. So I hope to listen SIG Docs' opinion on that. Thank you.
Awesome, yeah, and that makes a lot of sense to be able to use that milestone command the one thing I don't know, and maybe folks in the call know, I thought that the milestone command might have predefined parameters that it accepts. Do folks know whether or not that's the case?
Sorry, I couldn't understand your comment.
Oh, sorry. So when you use the /milestone command, if I were to type /milestone, Jim Angel's milestone, for example, that doesn't exist, it will error because there is a check, I believe, based on a key value document. I don't believe it looks directly into the repo for what milestones exist to link those. I could be wrong, and that's why I was looking for folks who might know a little more. I thought Ray might be chiming in here.
Yeah, you're right.
Ray.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There is a key value. I don't know where it's stored. Even if the milestone is in the K website repo, if it's not part of the setup in Prow. Like for example, I accidentally put a milestone 1.20 on a pull request for 1.21. It rejected it because in the 1.21 branch, it's not, the Prow wasn't set up for the milestone 1.20. Even though we know we have the K website milestone for 120. So it does have to be set up in Prow. I don't know who the best person is to get that set up. I'll take a look in the role handbooks because I think we might have to do that like post-release to set up the next milestone for Prow. So I could take a look at that and see what is needed to set up Prow for those milestone commands.
Yeah, it looks like Qiming, you might have just tested it yourself and found out it didn't work.
Yeah, I just type milestone full.
So what's interesting though is your response does say milestones in this repository, and it includes some of the Korean milestones as well.
Oh, yeah. So it might work.
Yeah, so I think my general thought is it makes sense to be able to use the milestone command here. This once again has been heavily, I shouldn't say heavily regulated, but this has been owned predominantly by SIG release. The use of the milestone command has just recently really been leveraged by SIG Docs over the past probably 2 or 3, maybe 4 releases. And so I think this might just need a little bit of wider communication once again with SIG release about leveraging the /milestone Prow command. I think it makes sense. I don't have any issues with the goal, but it'd be worth validating what the technical constraints are. I think if this involves updating a Prow file that has specific keys and values, the technical debt might outweigh the benefit of the convenience of it. So as far as next steps on something like this, I wouldn't mind just seeing more testing or maybe just more concrete information about leveraging the milestone Prow command. What I can do is I can take the action item. I don't see. Silko, do you know if you're part of the milestone maintainers group?
I'm not involved in, but Juni is involved. When we initiated first Korean localization, he involved in milestone team, milestone maintainer team, and other teams as well. So maybe I can introduce a PR. PR when Juni and other Korean localization team involved in milestone maintainer team. I can show you.
Yeah, so what I'm thinking here is I can add you to the milestone maintainer group. It's a GitHub team. It's in one of our repositories. And I'll take that action item to add you as a reviewer. I believe that there's no issue considering the fact this was previously ran by Junyi. So I don't think permissions or access is any problem there. I'll get you the access to run the /milestone maintainers or the /milestone prow command. And let's just validate before moving forward at a wider scale that this does work the way we anticipate it to. That way we don't go creating a big stink around something before knowing whether or not it works the way we expect it to. It looks like it might. Oh, Ray, looks like you might have beat
I
me to
put
it.
in the chat the instructions on how to modify the prow config file. That's from these docs role handbooks.
And those are always up to date and never wrong.
Almost.
Nice, yeah. No, those have been awesome. Cool, yeah, I appreciate that. Let me put that in chat as well. And that's what I'm fearing is, or my fear is that getting the access to run the prow command is not the big deal. That can happen no matter what. My fear is that it's going to be more complex to maintain creating a PR to create the branch in prow for its awareness and then going and commenting versus I think some of the leaders for the Korean localization have high-level access to write access to the repository to make those changes through the web interface. So, like I said, let me take the action item to add you to the maintainers group. Regardless, Sioko, I don't see an issue with that. And then let's pick this back up either at the next APAC meeting or asynchronously in Slack if I can help.
Okay. Thank you. So that's all for the Korean localization team update.
Awesome. Appreciate it. And looks like the next item is you as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Actually, I hope to ask that commit question of PR needs to be enforced. I hope to check because sometimes there are some contributors who propose a PR and not responding for not provide response for commit question request. So I'm not sure we are actually enforcing commit question to master branch or dev branch. How we are doing?
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the problem happens on all the documentation, all the different languages. So I feel like you're going to get a different answer depending on who you ask, but I can talk about what I would normally do. There is a prow command. It's a tied label, and let me see if I can find it. That will allow you to squash the PR through tied. And let me just find it, and that way I'm not looking while I'm talking.
Also, you are not requesting it commit question to contributor, but we are squashing the commit ourselves.
Right. So in this case, the general rule of thumb that I've followed is asking the contributor to squash the PR. That's just general best practices. It's a good skill to have. And ideally, folks are self-sufficient. They've opened up a PR. They can squash it. However, some folks, especially, doing like a typo fix or a small minor PR, they might not really have the desire to return and squash the commits, and we want to merge that PR. So what we end up doing is applying that label for merging it. And it looks like, Chilton, you might have supplied it there in chat, the /label tied merge method squash. And so what we end up doing is if you were to apply this label, you can do it either through the GUI or through the prow command here with /label. When you apply this label on a pull request, what will happen is when Tide merges the PR, Tide will squash it itself. Right now, the way Tide operates, it doesn't squash the PR. If a PR is 2 commits, it'll be 2 commits against master branch. If we apply that label, Tide merge method squash, Tide will then make a summary, squash it down to a single commit, and do it pragmatically via prow, or via Tide and prow. So that's been my rule of thumb. It's kind of a loose, depending on what your overall goals are. I know when I've acted as a PR wrangler and my entire goal was reducing the number of PRs and increasing velocity for merging PRs, I would just fly through and not wait for folks to go and squash it if it's been open for a certain amount of time. And however, with saying that, I do think it's a good skill set to have, and I do think it's worthwhile communicating that if there is time to allow it for the author to merge. That makes sense about how the tide label works and how that would squash the PR. Cool. Any other questions or comments on that? I'm curious, does anyone else feel differently about that methodology? I shared how I deal with squashing PRs. Like I said, it's the way I do it. It's not necessarily right or wrong. How do other folks handle that if they came across it?
I've seen the same as you, where we would ask the author to squash their commits if they don't after a week or two. Then I've seen that command used. But I do agree that squashing is it's not a difficult technique, but it could be daunting for someone who's doesn't use Git all the time. But
Yep, absolutely. Cool. I'm glad to hear I'm not alone there. And I will say that squashing is daunting when you have no idea what you're doing, speaking from past experience. But definitely once you understand some of the more core concepts of Git, it becomes a lot easier, definitely.
I just have to check this method. Tide label method is used to all approvers of English content or Korean content. I'm not sure it is in a guide document to approvers. So some new approvers may inquiry how to deal with this squashing issue. So maybe it can be shared to other approvers as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I do believe it is limited to the approvers to apply that label, I believe. Yeah, let me just check one thing real quick. All right, sorry about that. Trying to walk and talk here, but there is, I'm gonna send it in chat here and I can add it to the agenda as well. There is a slight documentation that I put in myself because I've ran into this a few times and wanted a way to remember when I'm wrangling PRs, how to apply the label. And the link I sent is helpful prowl commands for wranglers. Applying the label might not really matter that much, but as far as the squash label, and then if you wanted to retitle a PR, those come in handy a ton of times, acting as an approver or PR wrangler. The one thing you'll see is, like you were saying, I'm not sure if it is only approvers who can apply that label. I think it is, but you might see a reviewer try to do it, and maybe your approver needs to step in and make sure that label exists prior to LGTMing and approving that PR.
So related to squashing commits, maybe I can add something. I just paste a link to one of my PRs. It's about fixing links to etcd public documentation. I intentionally split this PR into 3 commits. The first one is about wrapping long lines. I feel really bad for long lines. So that's the first PR. I didn't change anything. Then in the second commit, I fixed the links. Then when fixing the links, I saw some very old content in the PR. So I put the third commit in the same PR. So I labeled that PR with the prowl command mentioned by Jim, but later on, Jim insisted that maybe we want to keep these 3 commits separate, don't squash them. So this is another story for your reference.
Yeah, that's a great point. I believe the rule of thumb is a commit should be a unit of work in entirely. So as you were saying, Chiming, it might make sense to leave these all individually as commits. I think more often than not, the authors of PRs who are not responding and they're not squashing their commits is usually not the same folks that are managing their PRs well, creating individual slices of commits, and creating a wonderful PR like you did. But yeah, I think that's definitely worth keeping into consideration, that if the individual commits make sense to leave them separate, there's no harm in leaving them as is, but more times than not, it's, patch -1 and then, fix 2 and fix 3 and fix 4. And it's all related to the same unit of work. And in that case, yeah, absolutely, you want to squash it. Cool. Any other questions or comments?
Oh, just a comment. Today we had our kickoff meeting for the Portuguese localization, and we think to follow the Korean team work model.
Awesome. And Jelton, I don't believe we've met before, so it's great to meet you.
Yeah, it's my second meeting.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Well, happy to have you here. Happy to help out. If you have any questions that we can answer about localization, these are the experts in the call here. And then there's also the monthly meeting, the first Monday of the month, I believe. There's more information in the on the community repo. I can link here in a second.
Yeah, I'm here because last year I attended to Brad Topol lecture in IBM, and since January I try to help in the localization to Portuguese.
Awesome. Happy to have you. Happy to help out.
Thank you.
If you have any question regarding Korean team's branch strategy and minor details, then please ask us, Korean team or me. That's okay. We would like to help you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that you had Brad Topol introduce you to the localization docs, because also Brad Topol is leading the efforts for the localization synchronization. It's a lot of words, but the meeting efforts that are once a month there. So like I said, I'll get that linked here in chat in just a second. Actually, I can send it now. I put it in chat there as well as in the agenda. But you'll see the link that I sent. There's the 4 meetings that SIG Docs has. There's the APAC SIG meeting, which is the 4th Tuesday of every month. That's what we're at currently today. The Korean team meeting is also in there for the Korean team localization. And then the one I was talking about with Brad Topol is the localization subgroup meeting. And that one is the one that meets monthly on Mondays at 1500 UTC. And that localization subgroup meeting is really focusing on streamlining all of the different localizations, how folks do branching, how folks do PRs and merges, and staying up to date and making sure all the things are all under one roof. That's a great meeting to attend, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem. And anything that we could help with as far as the 2021 kickoff meeting for the Portuguese localization?
No, till now it's okay. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if we can help, let us know. Please reach out to us, and we'd be happy to assist, and happy to have more hands helping localization. This is great to see more people contributing. Cool. And with that, we are at the end of our agenda. Does anyone have anything else they would like to discuss? All right. Sounds good. I'll talk to you all later. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening or day.